Okay, I call this meeting to order at 6:34 p.m. All please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the secretary please call roll?
Sure. Nicole Kingus.
Present.
Thomas Dowdy. Here. Misha Early. Cheryl Flesher.
Here.
Shirley Tolliver.
Present.
Lori Hicks.
Present.
Steve Baker, present.
Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? There being none, the agenda is as written. Next item on the agenda is recognition of people and programs. Mr. Golditz.
Madam President, the one thing on the list, and that's Thurston High School. Thurston was chosen by, what's the name of it? Not Newsweek, it's U.S. News and World Report. They rate high schools and universities, and Thurston's on its best high schools in the country list. And they measure lots of different things. They certainly look at graduation rate, attendance, daily attendance, number of AP classes, number of AP people who take the test and pass the test, all those kinds of things. They also look at students who are maybe not on the college track and what, the percentage of students who go on to college and those who don't, what are they prepared for? And so it's a great honor, and so. Very proud of everything that's going on at Thurston. And I've said this before, but I truly, honestly mean it. It doesn't just start in 9th grade. It really starts in preschool. And it's, it really is a progression as kids go up. They learn that Eagle way. And I said this, twice this year during football games, I had the chain gang guys from the other team mention about how great the behavior was of the kids in the class act that both of our kids are coaches, on Saturdays. Or chain gang. Chain gang are the guys who hold down markers.
Oh, okay.
That's what they're called, yeah. And, not the other chain gang.
Okay, you started this whole meeting off wrong.
I know where your mind is, Lori. And again, that kind of atmosphere and a culture doesn't start in 9th grade. It really is. It permeates through the elementary schools and all the way on there. So I'm really proud of everyone. That's something we all should be very proud of, and we're sure we get that news out there as we do. So that's all I have for today.
I was very pleased to share that with my son. Just moved their kids to Livonia.
They're not on the list.
Franklin is.
Is it?
Yeah, it was on the list.
That was an accident.
So.
I love our neighbors to the west, but
Yes. Right. Okay. Then, are there any board superintendent communications? Being none. Next item is comments from the audience. Mr. Baker, do we have any comments?
We have none, Madam President.
Next item is Plus Delta Plan for Improvement, and that goes over to Christine.
We have no deltas from the last meeting, which was held on November 25th.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Do I have a board member willing to move the consent agenda?
Madam President,
Mrs. Fletcher?
I'd like to move the adoption of the following resolution, please.
Mrs. Fletcher has moved the resolution. Is there support?
Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. The movement of the resolution by Mrs. Fletcher, support by Mr. Baker. Any questions, comments, concerns regarding the consent agenda? There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Next item is to receive the report from the district data coordinator, and that would be Mary Lou.
Hello.
So the first thing you'll notice is it looks a little different tonight. We're in transition to upgrade the technology in this room. So this is our interim upgrade. So let me know if you can't see it. I can move it closer to you. All right, when we get to look at it. So these are our 4 performance measures that we monitor at all levels. And the first time in September, I talked to you about school process. You had a board update about student learning. And then tonight, we're going to talk about demographics and enrollment. So I know that Brian keeps you very updated on enrollment, but this is an installment for your district data binder so that you can have access to it. The thing to notice, and again I know you know this, is that our full-time equivalent students, the FTE number declined. It went down 69 from the fall count data. And our enrollment, the demographics, our key demographics that we monitor, they've really remained constant for the last couple of years. So we look at African American students, Caucasian students, and economically disadvantaged students. So what? So this is the first year that we've seen a bigger drop, and actually since 2013, and that year we had an even bigger drop. And I went back and read the data presentation and said we needed to study it more. And I don't know if I just don't remember those. I didn't follow through back then like I do now. But we went up the next year, so it became a non-issue. So let's just hope that happens next year. That this will be a non-issue this year. If you think about the 2 big developments that happened this year, Livonia expanded its open enrollment. We had a charter school open right in our boundary. This is pretty good enrollment to only go down 69. I think that is true. So we do continue to attract new students, and we feel that it's because of these programs that are open enrollment in K2, the open enrollment in Pearson, Thurston, Eagle Scholars, our SOAR program, and the Share Time students. We feel like our ability to attract new students is due to our solid district reputation. Brian spoke about that. Even on the sidelines of the football game, we have a solid reputation. That we have high quality programs, and we have really effective PR initiatives.
I was curious, I didn't know Livonia, they have an open enrollment in Livonia, totally?
I think it's not total, but they have expanded it.
Yeah, they have expanded it. So they like everybody else, opened up their enrollment. But up until this year, it's been really select. So they would say, we have openings for, and I don't know the numbers, it might be a lot more. So let's say 20 second graders and 30 third graders and 17 fourth graders. So very selective numbers based on their schools and that. Livonia is, over the last couple of years, is experiencing quite a drain in students. If you're following it at all, they had to close a couple of elementary schools. And so they needed to do something. And so this year they greatly increased the number of students that they took in from my district.
I wasn't aware you could just do specific numbers, all in 115 here, 12 here.
You can.
So we did some analysis of the students that left the district, and the students, some of them had been on a waiting list in Livonia, and finally, I guess it's a lottery or something that is involved, and they finally, their number had been called. So now what? We're going to try to pronounce this name right. Continue the PR efforts by the company. Look at my cheat sheet here. COES, I think is how Jan told me to pronounce it. All right, COES Creative Group. That will continue those programs that I mentioned to increase our students. We also are exploring other opportunities to increase student enrollment. We're exploring a partnership in the future with a
career and technical education school, and also expanding the number of elite athletes that we have in the SOAR program. So we have some now, and it's in the process to expand that. So, Brian, would you like to talk a little more about those?
Sure, yeah, this is, we continue to look at how we can maintain programs. We're not getting a whole lot of help on the revenue side from the state. And, we've prided ourselves in doing things like the expanded, a very comprehensive preschool program with essentially at the grade level, right? And we don't get any money for those kids. We have a lot of support for teachers in terms of coaching and those kinds of things. And I think that you saw the last few years an increase in literacy in the early grades. That's a great sign, and I think it has to do with a lot of different things. But certainly, we've got some outstanding coaches and interventionists who are helping in that area. Those all cost us money. And so if the state's not helping us, we need to be looking for more revenues. And so we do have a little bit of a niche that we're trying to expand, and that is the hockey world has, it's not, in football you kind of go through Pee-wee, and if you're like a really good player, you go through high school and you get scouted and you go on to college and then the pros. Hockey's a different world. The elite hockey players don't go to school. They're identified early, and most high school elite hockey players, right, the best of the best, are playing in juniors, and they're living either out of state or they're living locally, but they're not going to high school because they're traveling around the country playing hockey. So they need a program. For a long time, the only game in town was K-12. It's a totally online program. And we actually had a young man who he's actually been signed with a pro team, and he's playing professional hockey. I forget which team. But he was a friend of, he was in the same hockey circle as Mr. Sims. So the mom was like, I don't know what to do. He's sitting at his kitchen table, and it doesn't work like the commercial says in his pajamas at his kitchen table trying to get his high school done. And so what can you do? So Mr. Sims kind of helped him out for a year. And then we opened up SOAR. And he said, God, this would be perfect for this kid. And it did. It worked out perfect. So we have both of his little brothers, and word is kind of spreading now in the hockey world. So we're continuing to press on that, and hopefully we will. I think right now we have about, somewhere in the 20s, between 20 and 30 hockey players who don't go to school. They don't go to middle school. They don't go to high school. They play hockey. They train for hockey, and then they come to SOAR. And so we're looking to leverage that a little bit. We've also are talking to a person who is looking at opening a CTE school. So it would be focused around building trades and building houses and plumbing and those kinds of things. Small, very small. But the idea is we would provide the Core 4 for them through the SOAR program, just like we do with the hockey. And then they would go to a different location, and they would learn how to build houses and do plumbing and stuff. And so that's another opportunity for us to bring in money. So we're always looking for different ways to up our CTE count in non-traditional ways, and it's helped us. We're not doing all these programs we're talking about without looking at that revenue side.
So even the kids, we know it, but maybe is watching, even those kids in the SOAR program and whatnot, they get towards our count.
Anyway, yeah, we would get a full FTE for those kids. And then we're responsible. And the nice thing about it is that the kids that are in these types of programs, one of the hard parts is that they don't really have a connection to any school. Well, if you're in our SOAR program, you can still be on our teams. You can play football or whatever. You can go to our dances. You get to walk across the graduation stage once you graduate. And so it gives them a sense of belonging too. Even though that they're living a very non-traditional high school, and some kids middle school time. So it's good for the kids, and it's really kind of cool. It's kind of cool to get to know the kids, and if you get an opportunity the next time we have the graduation ceremony, pay special attention to I forget.
SOAR graduates.
Yeah, the SOAR graduates and Matt Daly, thank you.
Yeah.
Matt Daly, pay close attention to Matt Daly and his kids in the hallways before, afterwards, and during the ceremony. It really fills a niche for those kids, and it's pretty cool.
Matt's on stage with us for graduation.
Yeah.
Matt's on stage.
Yeah.
Steve, did you have a question?
No, I think he answered it. Thank you.
I met the dad of the young man, the hockey.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. And he was so pleased with it.
Yeah.
And I told him my grandson graduated from SOAR. And so he said, oh, that's great. He started asking me a million questions. He was really pleased with SOAR.
Yeah, it certainly has helped us on the revenue side, the whole program itself. But it's really met the needs of a lot of different kids for a lot of different reasons. And so it's given us a lot of opportunities for students, and it's really a cool program. I don't know if you've ever had a chance to walk back there, during the day. Their hours are a little different than traditional high school, but it's cool. It's met all of our expectations. I know it's a lot more than you expected.
That's okay. I work in that hallway, the SOAR hallway, and there was a boy working at a table outside my office, and I just, walked by and said, hi, how you doing? He goes, I just love SOAR. It was so cute.
It's fun to walk through there too, because there's lots of whiteboards and stuff, like in that room and the room next to it, and you'll just see one of the teachers, maybe not even connected to SOAR. They'll be writing stuff and they'll be working with one of the kids, in the thing. It's really neat.
I'm kind of really excited about the partnership with the Career Tech, because that has been something that I've been trying to push for a while.
Yeah, we'll see, how that goes. I don't want us in any way to think that that's going to be a substitute for what our
No.
vision is for the district, yeah.
Right, no.
We need to bring that back with us, and I'm not sure exactly what that will look like, but that'll be our work for the next 2 years, is to make that sound.
So the last now what is that more detailed data will be put into the data binder. Jen will let you know when it's in there, to kind of give you some more information on these programs, to update you on that. So this is your plus delta for your electronic data binder. It's your opportunity to improve the data system at your level. So what are some pluses and deltas?
Well, a plus for me is that you answered my question before I had a chance to ask the question.
Oh, nice.
So, you had all the information, because I was wondering at first, so why did we go down in numbers? And, by waiting a half a minute, you were able to give the answers.
I knew that you were going to.
You knew that.
A plus for me was, this was very timely. This last week, someone asked me what our demographics were, and I made an educated guess, and I wasn't super close, but I was close enough. But anyway, so thank you. It was timely.
Great. So now you know where you can go to look those things up.
Absolutely.
Other pluses, deltas, they're always good for improving the system. All right, thank you.
And Mary Ruth Bird, I know you don't report to us, but if you would like to go home, go home.
So thank you, but I really wanted to stay for the book stuff.
Okay,
so-
you are
but
welcome to
thank
stay.
you, I
You just don't
appreciate that. Appreciate your thoughtfulness.
Okay, next item on the agenda is to consider the district emergency operations plan. Mr. Gold.
The board discussed the district's emergency operation plan at their meeting on November 25th, 2019. Michigan's revised school code, section 380.1308B, 2, states that not later than January 1st, 2020, a school district shall develop an emergency operations plan for each school building with input from the public, and the Board of Education shall adopt the emergency plan at a public meeting. Emergency operations plan developed and adopted must include guidelines and procedures that addresses at least all of the following: school violence and attacks, threats of school violence and attacks, bomb threats, fire, weather-related emergencies, intruders, parent and pupil unification, threats to a school-sponsored activity or event, whether or not it's held on school premises, a plan to train teachers on mental health and pupil and teacher safety, plan to improve building security, an active violence protocol, continuity of operations after an incident, a vulnerability assessment. Madam President, there is a resolution for board consideration.
Okay, also part of this is we are required to ask for public input. Are there any questions from the public regarding the district plan?
We're it, guys.
You are the public.
Hey, we're not really, we're not really public either.
Okay, there being none, we'll move on to the resolution. Do I have a board member willing to move?
Madam President.
Thank you, Mrs. Tolliver. Mrs. Tolliver's moved the resolution. Do I have support? Support. The movement of the resolution by Mrs. Tolliver, support by Ms. Kangas. Are there any questions, comments, concerns regarding the resolution?
Madam President,
Mr. Baker?
just for information, I will note that we did ask for input from the public, and that will be recorded as such in the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Okay, there being no other questions, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries.
Madam President,
Mr. Baker?
Mr. Galvez, will you make sure that those who have worked very hard on this plan are thanked by us?
I will. I definitely will. I know that this is a living document, and so the work continues on this.
Yeah. And appreciate it. Okay, next item on the agenda is the Plus Delta and the Board Communications. Mr. Baker. That's where we're at, comments from the audience. Oh, I'm sorry. That's where I'm at, but I'm reading the other one. Comments from the audience on topics related to the agenda. Mr. Baker, do we have any comments?
We have none, Madam President.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Plus Delta and Board Communications. Christine?
So for this evening, do we have any pluses or deltas for how this meeting went and what we could do to improve? Well, Shirley?
I'd like to thank Mary Booth for her dedication and always giving stuff to us, so we'll have it before our meeting.
Okay, thank you. And so you said she gave you the information prior to the meeting?
Yes, it was in our packet.
Okay.
Jan and I have a system.
Yeah. All right, any other pluses?
And it's always easy to understand, direct, succinct. I appreciate that. I don't have to think a lot. I can look at it and get it. Thank you.
Are there any deltas, things we could improve upon? All right.
Okay, next item on the agenda is this book study, The Sticking Points by Hayden Shaw, chapter 6 and 7. And I believe Mr. Bob Rudetsky is going to take that.
Well, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So, at our last meeting, we talked about three main things. So I'd like to open it up to the group this evening to see if there's somebody who would be so kind to define what we talked about in terms of ghost stories and the role that ghost stories play. Is there somebody who would be so kind to volunteer to share their response about what did we talk about when we talked about ghost stories the last time we were together, and what significance those ghost stories might play on our generations? Perhaps you might even have an example. Mr. Goldis.
The ghost stories are significant events that impact a generation, sometimes a society, and sometimes the world. An example would be, I got my generations mixed up. I believe it's for millennials. It's the 9/11, so that would be a ghost story. Technology would be a ghost story. It's something that significantly impacted that generation, and maybe not another generation.
Thank you. Yeah. How many people agree with that? If you agree, raise your hand. All right, so we have consensus. Very good. Is there a volunteer that would be so kind to share an example of a ghost story for a traditionalist? Brian was kind enough to give us the ghost story of a millennial, but how about for a traditionalist? Lori?
Depression.
Yes, we talked about the Great Depression, right? All right, very good. And who would be so kind to share one about baby boomers? Shirley?
Civil rights movement.
We talked a lot about the civil rights movement, right? You think back to some of the images that we had on our handout the last time. So we're going to switch up our format this evening. And so I would just like for you to view these 4 brief clips before we jump into our work tonight. And so what I would preface these video clips with is that the last time we were together, we talked about those 3 things of ghost stories, and the ghost stories of traditionalists as well as baby boomers. And so we talked about the shift from fireside chats of the radio and the role that the radio played for the Great Depression and World War II. And then we transitioned to talking about the role of music in both eras, right? And then we also talked about some of the ghost stories for the baby boomers, like you heard with Shirley with the civil rights movement. We talked about the Vietnam War conflict quite a bit as well. And so we're going to travel in chronological order, so we're going to take a look at these 4 clips, and then we're going to transition to our work tonight. So we're going to transition away from Tinkerbell and the baby boomers, right? And now, that was from the book. That's a direct quote.
We don't want to leave Tinkerbell behind.
We do not. And so I hate to leave Tinkerbell behind, and so certainly she's alive and well with
What do you guys want to sit here?
with
That way you can see the screen.
Walt Disney. And then
Oh, you can see it? Okay.
we're going to transition from Tinkerbell, and then we're going to transition to what the author talks about, and this is a direct quote, Donkey Kong, right? And so that's where we're gonna start off tonight.
He's an icon.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Reporting tonight from Berlin.
From the Berlin Wall specifically, take a look at them. They've been there since last night. They are here in the thousands. They are here in the tens of thousands. Occasionally they shout, Die Mauer muss weg, the wall must go. Thousands and thousands of West Germans come to make the point that the wall has suddenly become irrelevant. Something, as you can see, almost to party on. How do you measure such an astonishing moment in history? The East German government said tonight they were going to make more openings in the wall, at least a dozen more. Put bulldozers right through the wall so that more people could cross to the west. The East German communist leadership tonight said there'd be a new election law guaranteeing secret elections which the rest of the world could monitor. And only 24 hours after East Germans were told they could go anywhere, anytime, the Soviet Union said, that was a sensible move.
Thousands of East Germans came across the border today, perhaps more than 100,000. So many that border police lost count. And at every border crossing, thousands of West Germans there to say welcome. Some of the really good news today was for the East German government. While thousands and thousands came to look, even gape at this showcase of capitalism, the vast majority said they would be going back. The simple act of giving people the freedom to travel may have convinced East Germans they need not take flight whenever the door opens just a fraction. It has been an astonishing day. Hour after hour, all through today, thousands and thousands of West Germans have come to the wall to see for themselves, to climb up on this hideous structure, to finally look down at what has been no man's land for so long.
All right. So that is our first clip for this evening. And here is another clip that is often associated with our Gen Xers.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
America! Demand our MTV! I want my MTV!
I want my MTV.
I want my MTV! Call your cable company and say I want my MTV!
Turn it on, leave it on, America, Stephen Lee,
I want my MTV. All right.
I want my MTV.
I want my MTV. 24 hours a day on cable TV.
I want my MTV!
Yeah, too much is never enough.
So somehow our society survived
Barely.
the MTV craze. And Brian referenced this earlier, so we're also going to be talking about the millennials this evening. And this is considered one of their ghost stories or nightmares. Keep in mind, at the time, text messaging was practically primitive, almost non-existent. So, we talked about the transition from the radio to the television, so we're still very much in the television era for this ghost story for the millennials. However, just 7 short years later, we are very much into the technology craze for this ghost story that is spoken about as well as being a reference point for millennials as a monumental moment.
7 p.m. on the East Coast, we're back on the air and we have news. There will be young children in the White House for the first time since the Kennedy generation.
Barack Obama, in our view, President-elect of the United States of America.
Barack Obama is projected to be the next president of the United States of America.
Barack Obama, 47 years old, will become the president-elect of the United States.
This is a profoundly important passage.
So the person speaking right now, anyone want to guess whose voice that is? That just shifted to starting to speak. I'll play it.
Wasn't it Dan Rather?
Out of the deep shadows of our racist past.
Oh, Tom Brokaw.
Tom Brokaw, right? We talked about Tom Brokaw last time. I referenced a book that he wrote about the traditionalists. See if anybody checked it out since we last spoke. Or rented it on ebooks. It's called The Greatest Generation, right? So here you have Tom Brokaw, who wrote that book about the Greatest Generation, the traditionalists, and that's who's speaking right now. But similarly, how we talked about the role of the radio and the television, a big part of the Obama election was mobilizing the millennial vote and the role that social media played in that.
that began with that first slave offloaded on the ship.
But whenever a kid said, I want to be president, I literally saw black parents say, son or daughter, you may think of me something else. I have 9 nieces and 4 nephews. And when I talk to them, I can actually say that and mean it.
So, similar to the last time we spoke, we talked about the role of the television, and I don't know that we got this in depth last time, but does anyone know off the top of their heads the first televised presidential debate?
Kennedy and Nixon, wasn't it?
Kennedy and Nixon, the 1960 presidential election. So you think about, again, the role of not only television here, but the role of social media, right? And so oftentimes, like Tom had just mentioned, that Nixon-Kennedy debate is often referred to, and so you even heard some of the commentary. It's the first time that you will have young children in the White House since the Kennedys. And so you remember those photographs on television, or some of you might remember those. And then certainly the photographs that are in all the pictorial books too of the Kennedy family. And so here you have that reference being drawn on, but now you have all this news that's not only happening across the television networks, but also throughout all the social media waves as well. And so that's where we're going to begin our work this evening.
Tom has a question.
Well, just a statement.
Tom.
Interesting enough, they say that debate was one of the main reasons that cost Nixon the election. And not so much as what he said and commented on, but the way he was sweating and didn't appear well on TV, where JFK had the makeup on and they had everything rocking, and yeah, they said that was one of the major reasons he lost that election, because it was darn close, that election.
Yeah, that's a great point, and many reports share the same piece that you're sharing too. So
I was only 7. I learned that later.
So I appreciate you adding that. If you'd be so kind to take one and pass it down, take one and pass it down. And this is where we're going to begin our work this evening. And so we are going to go ahead and work independently for 4 minutes, and we're just going to answer questions 1 through 4. So you have the reference of the videos that we just viewed, the 4 videos with some added brief commentary, but then you also have your reference guide to stick with the mantra of our previous 2 sessions together. So on the front, on page 76, there's your quick reference guide to the Gen Xers. And for those of you that recall, I think Nisha had mentioned that she was a Gen Xer, so unfortunately our board expert's not here tonight. So, but perhaps we have other Gen Xers amongst us this evening, so you might need to draw on some of their knowledge. And then, as Nicole had shared with us last time, if you flip it over on the back, we have an expert guru among us this evening with Nicole on page 92. So you have your quick reference guide as you look at those first 4 questions, as well as the 4 videos. So before we transition to our 4-minute independent work time, what questions might you have? All right, we'll reconvene in 4 minutes.
What year roughly did the wall come down? I forget.
89.
89? November 63 to 89.
That's about the time it went up.
Yeah.
It started going up. It was the early 60s. I believe while JFK was in office, I think. About 20 seconds.
Yeah.
We're going to begin to transition into our next activity. And so, is there any objections to moving around a little bit tonight?
I'm not gonna move.
Okay, that's fine. Any other objections to moving around tonight?
No. I've been wheeled around enough.
Appreciate your honesty. Is there anybody else that prefers to stay put? Alright, so we're going to go ahead and break off into two groups. We're going to break off into the millennials and the Xers. And we're gonna start with Christine. She's gonna be an Xer. Then Brian will be a millennial. And then we'll have Nicole be an Xer. Millennial. Xer. Millennial. Xer. Millennial. Xer. Millennial. Cheryl, what are you?
I'm an X.
Okay, so all the Xers will be close to Cheryl, and all the millennials, you're out there.
Oh, yeah.
You're at the coffee shop.
Millennial? All right.
No, I'm not
You
millennial.
must be, yeah, right, exactly.
Millennials.
Yeah,
I-
All right.
He's the millennial.
I am gonna close your binder here, okay?
Three of us.
Or well, stylish.
So millennials, you're answering 3 and 4. You're answering 3 and 4. And for the overachievers, go ahead and start answering number 5. So 3, 4, and 5.
Gotcha. All right.
All right, Xers. Xers, you're answering questions 1 and 2 collectively as a group.
This is what baby boomers do.
And then once you're done answering 1 and 2,
We get comfy.
you're going to go ahead and transition to number 5.
I don't know why you struggled with it.
And we're going to go
I
ahead
was able to answer
and
5
reconvene
with
as a
some
group
thoughts.
in 5
Not
minutes.
necessarily great ones.
5 minutes to answer.
First
get
four,
the
I
4.
didn't even get. I didn't do any of it. I was having a hard time focusing on the.
How big?
I had to kind of narrow it down a little bit to make it workable for me.
You got it.
I'm interested in thoughts.
Everybody good?
Like I said, I'm not gonna.
But technology,
Yeah.
that it was interesting how the author described it, that we learned it at work.
We're gonna start?
Next group kind of learned it at home.
I
Next
missed the
group didn't
last
really learn
study,
it.
but
They just,
putting the
they're
hearing
the way they did it.
the generation
Oh.
X, it seems like they were
We learned it at work.
more, they dealt with
That's
more
when we first
physical
started
things
our
than technological things,
Yeah.
more physical challenges
That was.
were happening on and around them, you know, that affected more so.
And it was really different. I said, oh, now we have to.
You know, same
Yeah.
with the baby boomers, we
Big old
get a lot
black
of war
box
and different things
computers
like
like
that.
this.
There was a lot of things
That was
with
so-
the
So
millenniums
one
were
question
more
I'm going to
tech.
ask this group,
Yeah,
when we all
ask
come
them
back
as a group.
together,
Right.
is if you don't get what you want
And it
as
was-
a
and-
young,
yeah.
For the middle.
what happens?
For the millennials,
What do you
yeah.
expect to
I
happen
mean, and they,
when you go
and
through the
millennials
drive-through as a
get
millennial?
saturated with everything immediately because of the tech.
That's the first thing we do.
You know, I mean,
Like the
They
McDonald's.
go right to their
they
phone.
expected
No,
to
or they go right to their phone.
Just for
Yeah.
First thing I took away
doing
when I
that,
became
where
president of RTJA.
the Generation X's and the baby boomers and stuff,
Oh,
it took time to process and it was a slower getting the
I think,
information to them, so it was more physical,
So,
more
if
manual.
I go to McDonald's
So one follow-up question
and
on
I don't
that
like
for the group
what I'm seeing,
is,
there's a Burger King, there's a Taco Bell,
That's
there's
right.
a Taco John's, there's a.
and why did
The
they
same thing if you go in a grocery store. I mean, when you look in the grocery store,
What
there
do you
are
expect from our
Xers.
friends?
What
It
do
was
Gen
so
Xers
few
expect
choices.
the
So
role
like
of
cereal,
friends
those
Yeah.
Rice Krispies, Corn Flakes,
Yeah.
right, and Frosted Flakes, I think.
I know there's more than that, but not nearly what they have today, that's for sure.
Now,
But in the grocery store, my kids,
One thing I
they
noticed
buy
is
a
that the
product because
events
they look
for
at reviews on it
Gen
Yeah.
X
and see what.
seem to be more
That's your
So-
technology.
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
nature,
They
whereas
do.
the
That-
boomers and traditionalists,
You know, for me, for those guys, I'm more abstract.
you know,
Like when I think of like 9/11 and all of that, I think of the birth of fake
I mean, you know,
patriotism.
World War
You know, this
I and II.
just dummy fake patriotism, and that if you're not behind us, you're not a patriot. If you don't agree with us, you're not a patriot.
You know, it's
Thanks
really
to your
our
taking
focus
going
is
in.
on how it
And then I put, you know,
Right,
with
it's more
Obama,
an
a
American
neutral.
Right, whereas now it's like the Berlin Wall.
Because you know I ain't gonna say technology.
The wall, you know, the
What
remember,
similarity
you're a millennial.
as
It doesn't feel like a
millennials?
I thought I was supposed to be telling my point of view from this.
Yeah.
Because we get
You are.
more
You are.
information quicker
it can
from
be
all
both.
over,
Yeah.
where we
So
didn't have
what-
that
might
You know, about
you
processing.
as millennials
Right,
have in
right.
common with your grandparents?
Even sometimes news sources that we get nowadays.
Well, the
Definitely a new drink.
Some of them buy more on TV than the phone. Some of their habits.
Some of their habits.
Just keep pointing at you. Because we would go to Europe.
She's
Spend the
millennial.
summer, yeah, they go right to the boats. And I stayed on the farm with them.
Don't we see that with our kids,
He
because
said,
all
come on,
our
Sharon, let's go out and do this,
millennials.
this, and this.
Right,
And I'm
like
looking
your
at
mine
it,
are boys
okay.
are millennials.
And then I'd start.
You know, so I
My dad
kind of
said,
relate to Nicole because they do the same thing. If I have a question,
Yeah, but
out comes
I
the
wanted to
phone.
know.
Yeah. Or I'll find myself saying, well, I need this information, can you get it for me? Out comes the phone. You know, it's not even a
Mom, you
tablet.
just have to ask me to answer you.
Right, it's not even.
Okay, you mean I don't even have to look it up?
It's not even a computer or a tablet or iPad anymore, even our phone and their watch.
You ever been shot
My wife
at?
talks to the watch or gets alerts
Like that.
and,
That's
you know,
it. During the
so it's
1960s,
all
70s.
hands-on for
Yeah, I
them
was
now.
trying to get home.
Number
The
one
sniper
is,
was on
has
top of
nothing to do with millennials, it's just generation X.
Right, right.
So
But
it's
so
not-
you
Going down the
demonstrated
boulevard,
this
I
question,
said,
kind of took us in a
I
different
live
way.
by
yeah.
UAD.
So
You know, and that
we're
was
two
quite a
also.
ways from here, and I'm trying to
So
get
as
home.
Xers,
I said, oh my
as Gen Xers,
And
when you
kids
think
ask
about
me many
when we talk
questions.
about traditionalism being
Because I would tell them how
what
we
do
would
you
march.
notice different from traditional
What did you do?
baby boomers when you
No,
think
I
about
told them.
Christine, if I can borrow
They
that.
kept asking me questions,
When you
and
think about
I had to
Q,
get out of
that's-
there. I said, wait a
What do you notice
But
might be missing
I was
for
really
Xers that is
surprised
not
that some of
missing
the
for
students
traditionalism?
did ask me questions.
It's a good question, because as I've been reading this book, I keep thinking of differences.
I know.
Yeah.
I have not at all focused on what are some of the similarities.
Because we've gone off on a different direction.
It's interesting what you said about the
Let's go
protest.
back.
We millennials,
Being one of these people.
protesting is it more of a,
They're starting to now. I was really surprised. We're getting more, and some of the groups that I belong to.
That's what I remember, family focused TV, they were the
We call ourselves
position.
what is
Yeah,
passing the torch.
a mom, a dad,
And they
we
are
sat down for dinner
interested
all together.
in
Yeah, yeah.
Not always, but
Yeah.
And very big here, a lot about making things
family
better.
and friends.
Yes, they do.
Yeah,
Right.
friends became
And
family.
so the
Right,
protest to me feel like
Even
it's
the
on
music.
social media.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
protests on
Exactly.
Facebook, well, not Facebook anymore,
I
that's
call
not
the
much
music
do.
like up
But
in
whatever it is that they do
Snapchat.
now,
Yeah,
it's
Snapchat.
yeah, Snapchat,
Yeah.
but I think that's
Yeah.
their
It's like
vehicle of protest.
Rainbows and unicorns.
Getting
type of thing.
together.
And more so than
Yeah, that was
organizations
my
and email.
yeah,
Yeah.
it.
In the book,
Yeah.
that's, in reality, is that
No idea what it
And let me tell you, the Disney movies that came out during our generation were phenomenal.
So start to think about who you want to be your group spokesperson.
But see, we live that.
I think it's easier to protest though.
I'm honest, and I would not
I
have
am
the
saying
same school.
And now,
Well,
Because you're not getting out there.
maybe that's our,
and now my granddaughter,
Granddaughter,
and there's
the other
yes,
for me
that
is
first
that kind of the importance of now
Always
is
something
so much not.
you know.
Not like
Think about
Everything we had, it's like everybody.
You would like to be the spokesperson, just a spokesperson, no questions.
In our first assignment,
Yeah,
5
they're
years
concerned
ago,
now.
three or four different questions.
I had no idea.
I had always, I really,
I'll give you a bonus 90 seconds.
Thank you.
Because of Cheryl's commentary. Bonus 90 seconds.
because of my, because I'm gonna give them buildings, I ran into the positive.
90 seconds.
You just do the rainbow and the base.
all the time, you know, they had
She's
that
just taking
commercial
it
about
all
that
in,
woman.
because I am
and
so glad I'm a millennial, because I
Yeah.
cannot deal with
And
it.
she gets up and
Her husband gave her
I
a
know.
exercise bike or
I
something. She's a fit person.
Yeah.
Well, I agree.
But their stock actually fell because of the social media.
Yeah.
Protests.
The timing
Really?
we get.
I don't know.
When we had our kids.
Oh, yeah.
So
But to
we,
to hear the
we
reason
live
why
a different generation for our children.
because this woman was in good shape.
So that.
They thought the women were crying out that this guy is getting down on her and is buying her a bike to make her exercise.
Well, no, it couldn't have been that maybe her knees are bad, she can't do high impact anymore. It couldn't have been that maybe, hey honey, could you give me a Peloton? I'd really like to have one of them bikes. No, everybody was trying. Everybody wants to look at negativity first. Negativity first.
It's the power
But
of
I
social
had
media.
taste
Yeah. It's the power of people not thinking and negativity first, and then social media takes off and runs with it.
I get it, but that is, I mean, it's something we all have to consider.
That's our timer, folks.
Maybe back in the day.
We're at time.
Would pick up steam.
Go ahead and take 30 seconds to wrap up your existing conversation.
Push stupidity rapidly.
You're right, Tom, that is.
So then take 15 seconds to wrap up your existing conversation. And then we're going to go ahead and hear from our Gen Xers. Okay, do we have a group spokesperson for the Gen Xers to pave the way for our millennials?
You do.
All right.
And it's not me.
Cheryl, go ahead.
Christine, she was taking the notes.
Yeah, so I'm the spokesperson.
Tagger.
If you'd be so kind to answer the first two questions, and then we'll come back to 5.
Okay, all right. So when we look at, how the ghost stories differ in Generation X from the previous 2 generations, we noticed that a lot of the ghost stories have more technology involved. They're more, and they're more fast-paced. Like the information gets to people quicker than it once did. And also, the events tended to be more national or global in nature, just outside of the bounds of the country, more so than with traditionalists and the baby boomers. Did I say anything? So number 2, how do the listed events, TV shows, and music selections define Generation X? We summed it up in a phrase: rainbows and unicorns. When you look at the TV shows and the nature of them and the relationships that are depicted within it, the family units that are there, friends, even the songs are all
What do you
happy,
mean by Friends?
positive. Friends, the show.
Oh, the TV show.
The TV show, but then even the friendships within there, and that Seinfeld was listed as one of the TV shows, and it's really a show about friends and relationships, and the songs are, happy and very positive and optimistic. So yeah, that kind of sums up.
Very good. What were your 2 bonus questions?
The role of our friends. That's all I got so far. Sorry, what was that question?
Yeah, we couldn't really hear the question.
So the role of
our
friends
in Generation X, like friends that we have in our lives. What are is the role? It kind of is an extension of our family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you spoke to that
Yes.
with the shift, and then that's where you see the byproduct in TV.
Yes.
And you can debate back and forth whether TV was first or the demand of the generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the author talks a lot about that.
Yeah.
And that all of a sudden the family unit extends to not just the family, but to friends also, hence the TV show Friends. Right?
Yes.
And Friendsgiving came from all of
Friendsgiving.
that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And how about your second one? You touched on that one also.
What was the second one?
Yeah, but he kept
Yeah, he kept
interrupting our-
adding on loud.
It was a lot of sensory input all at once.
We're done with our
So-
our thinking pattern. He really, and he's getting a delta, he already knows that, so he's just pushing it.
So the second one is when you look at Gen X's key events, what might be missing? I don't know if anybody from our millennial group wants to help out our Xers tonight.
Yeah,
Christine talked about it. She intimated around it when she answered their number 2. What's missing?
Can you repeat the question?
So what was missing from when we look at Generation X, and when you look at the key events, what's missing versus what we saw and talked about the last time when we looked at traditionalists and baby boomers? What's absent from the Gen Xers key events.
No,
You got it.
Persian Gulf is there. The Persian Gulf War is there.
Yes, Persian Gulf War is there, but Lori is accurate in terms of a large national mass scale war,
Didn't
right?
have a world war.
Right. We didn't have a World
Right.
War II, we didn't have a Korea, and we didn't have a
Vietnam.
Vietnam. So you're both accurate,
I
right?
think there were very few, if any, deaths in the Persian Gulf.
I believe you're correct. Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong. I also think that it lasted like a month.
There wasn't a
So it's
long
pretty
war.
quick, right? So you're both accurate, but that is something that you'll notice that is absent, right? But
Yeah.
you notice what Christine had mentioned, in that you see these more globalized events, right?
Mhm.
The Berlin Wall coming down.
Yeah.
You see the war against AIDS, right?
I wonder if there was a difference too in that piece of what the Persian Gulf War was the first time we saw a war in real time. You remember watching the smart bombs and
Yeah, that's
Scud
right.
missiles and
right, we were watching it happen. The guys on the rooftops, showing it. I don't know that happened in the Vietnam War. You saw the newsreel,
At times
but
it
not
did.
real
Not
time.
as much as that, but at times it was real.
Yeah, we watched the whole thing play out for a month and a half.
yeah,
How many of us were glued to our television at night
yeah,
watching Scud missile reports?
yeah. Great point. Great point. So nicely done on both of the bonus questions. Let's transition to the millennials. And yes, appreciate all the side commentary from Amy, from Lori, from Brian. So let's transition to the millennials. Who is the spokesperson for our millennials? I know it was a tough competition over here.
We're going to do it as a team.
Yes.
Oh, okay. It's very millennial of you. They were working collaboratively over here, in case you were wondering.
I'm glad you picked up on that.
I did. I picked up on it. You did very good.
Yeah.
They worked collaboratively together.
You're right.
That's right.
So kind of, these are answers to both questions 3 and 4, because we really didn't distinguish between the two. But we talked about their generation is all about preserving their self-esteem, and that they expect to get that toy at McDonald's with their Happy Meal, that they get a trophy for participating, just for participating. That technology is life. They live on their phones, and really don't even go to stores to shop. They do shopping online and check the ratings of things online, and so everything's with technology. We did talk about, so you asked us a question that we had a hard time answering, but the question was, what's the similarity between millennials and traditionalists?
Correct.
So what we ended up talking about was that the millennials seem to care about their grandparents. I think that's what you said was their similarities between them and their grandparents. So they like to ask questions about how things were when the grandparents were growing up. So there's that care about the past and kind of living in the present. There's not too much focus on the future. And then they have an incredible amount of consumer choices. And if they don't like something, they'll just go somewhere else to get it.
Yeah.
Those were the things would my team like to add to that?
You nailed it.
You'd make a great teacher.
Oh.
Is there anybody from the Xer group? So one of their bonus questions was the Happy Meal toy. The author talks a lot about that in the book, and what that means for the generation. And they give some, pro and con stories to that, right? About what the byproducts are and whether it's a pro or a con. So they got that one. Then they got part of the second one. Is there anybody from the Xer group that wants to solve the puzzle for them about what is the direct link? Perhaps when you look at their key events of the traditionalists and you look at the key events for the millennials, what's the link?
We don't have the key events for the traditionals.
Oh, got it. Okay. I did not bring extra copies of those.
Oh, the Great Recession and the Great Depression.
Yes, so that's one.
Yeah.
Great Depression, Great Recession.
What
Not
about
that they're the
Dow
same.
Jones that's the highest records?
Yep, Dow Jones, right? Highest records on both ends, right? The roaring 20s. And then you look at the stock market today, highest it's ever been. And then another major key event, we actually looked at one of those key events today, and then we talked about this one the last time we were together briefly.
The towers and,
Pearl Harbor?
You got it. There it is, right? So the only time that you have American soil that was attacked, right? So you have Pearl Harbor, and then shortly thereafter, President Roosevelt comes on the radio and declares war against Japan, right? And so same thing with the Twin Towers, an attack on American soil, and shortly thereafter, you have President Bush goes on TV, right? And he declares the war on terror, right? So nicely done. 3.
Thank you.
Well done. Group effort. Very collaborative. So, thoughts on question number 5?
I have some information.
Information on number 5.
Yes. Just some tidbits. 10,000 millennials a day are joining the workforce. That was a quote from the book, which I thought was very interesting. And not only that, but their parents are very involved in their jobs.
Yes.
Yes.
imagine that.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like helicopter parents.
I
Did you
know.
ever
My
see the
husband
episode
works
of
at
Ellen?
my husband works at U of M in admissions. He was in admissions, and he was just appalled at how many parents called to ask questions about their child's application to college, and they can't answer to the
No.
parent.
No.
because-
Yeah,
That's
right.
right.
Yeah, but
That's
he's like,
funny.
It is.
When I was at Send and in the personnel role, one of the young ladies had applied to become a missionary. And so part of my process was to have a Skype call with her. And about halfway through the interview, I hear a cough, and there's nobody that I'm seeing who's coughing. The mom was sitting in on my interview with her, unbeknownst to me.
Wow. But a tidbit of hope that the millennials have the potential to be the most productive generation in history.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. If they can leave mama home.
Yeah. Or with support of mama.
Thoughts on number 5 that the millennials would like to add?
I think the caring about the past, I think that also they care deeply about our life
Yeah.
and society and wanting to make it better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, personally, I don't think, the only effect me I can see in one way, and that's, I don't know if it's them for sure, them, but are they the ones being so, everything's gotta be politically correct, and their feelings are getting hurt every time you say something that doesn't quite, which I find to be more ridiculous by the day. Is that the group that's gonna get that one?
It's kind of a combination. It's a good observation, though. It's a good observation.
Of the Xers and the millennials?
Probably majority, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, there's some boomers that would be in that camp
Oh,
also.
there are.
Yeah. Especially those that were, a part of the women's rights movement, civil rights movement, perhaps protesting any of the wars. So I think it's kind of cross-generational, but certainly it's being talked about much more now than it probably ever has been.
Yeah, I mean,
And they're the ones that are doing the bulk of the posting.
Yeah, there's one really keen with that Me Too movement, which is cool, I'm behind it.
Yeah.
But when they make statements that women don't lie,
Sure.
and people believe it, I mean, my mother told lies, and I love my mom.
You're wrong. Women do not.
Hey Tom, there's only 3 of us in the room, and Brian just left, so I'm just saying, Bubba.
I'll stand alone, Bubba.
Here, go down swinging.
So I appreciate all the observations tonight. as throughout the entire book study. The only tidbit I would like to add in addition to what was just shared too is that with the Xers, they're the smallest generation. So if you notice that on your quick reference guide. And then the other thing too is relatively recently, you have the millennials are now the largest, right? Which was not the case up until relatively recently. It was the boomers.
Right.
And the other thing too, just a general observation that I can't help but acknowledge, given where we're at, and you know, all the chatter lately is, you know, political thoughts aside. What's interesting right now is if you tune in at all to any of the Democratic debates, and certainly there was one not that long ago that was right here in Detroit at the Fox Theater. It's the first time on the debate stage that you have all four generations that are represented. And what's interesting is that if you listen to their responses, you can hear a lot of the things that we're talking about. You hear that come out in the candidates' responses. So it's the first time ever on the debate stage that you have quite the sampling from all four generations.
Have we had 3 generations previously in that country?
That I don't know. I do remember that there was talk back when Bob Dole ran against Bill Clinton that more than likely he was going to be the last World War II veteran, right. To run. Yeah. So we don't have any traditionalists that are quite that old, right? Because most World War II veterans now are well into their 90s. So it's a good question. I'm not sure about that, but it's kind of interesting because when you listen to their responses, you hear a lot of the generational things that we've been talking about come out in their responses, especially when they go back and reference, right? Especially on the family questions. We did a lot of that conversation our first 1 or 2 times together about, you know, we had some good laughs too about, you know, paper clips and saving this and that, and, you know, where all that comes from. And so you hear that in some of the responses. So if you have a chance to tune in at all, I think a lot of you will pick up on it because we've been talking about it for the last couple months. So,
Yeah.
so that concludes tonight.
Other than that, though,
Sure.
my nephew was born in 2001.
Oh, sure.
And he's so excited now because he just turned 18 on the 28th of November. And so he called me and he says, "Oh, Shirley, I'm so excited." So he says, "I guess I'm going to have to vote absentee." And I said, "You can't vote absentee on your first time." He said, "I can't." I said, "No." And he goes to school in Maryland. So he says, "Well, I guess I'm going to have to register in Maryland." So then he was telling me who he liked. Yay! I like Yay, and I was cracking up at him. I says, "You know, why do you like him?" He says, "I know he won't win, but I'm going to vote for him anyway in the primary."
There you go. You know, and so I appreciate you sharing that. I'll end on this note. So Brian, Christine, and I were in a recent conversation, and somehow Y2K came up, and people like Shirley's grandson that are a millennial, they were not alive for Y2K.
Oh.
Because in 3 weeks it's going to be 2020.
Yeah.
So they weren't. Some millennials were not yet born. You know?
Right.
So just kind of interesting tidbits. Well, thanks everyone.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Jason.
everybody's engagement, Madam President. That concludes tonight's meeting.
You remember we were wondering if I was going to call on Monday morning?
Yes,
Oh my God.
Although it wasn't in our hands at the time. Yeah,
They thought that everything was going to be messed up. And I stayed all night long.
All right.
To make sure
I'm very
everything was
interested.
right.
Well, next item on our agenda is to adjourn. And it is 7:48. I declare this meeting adjourned.